Good morning, everybody. This is a live severe weather briefing ahead of an active day today. In fact, it looks like a tornado outbreak across the central and eastern Texas Panhandle. Probably one of the more substantial severe weather events that I've chased in years here in the Texas Panhandle. And the Storm Prediction Center has added a moderate risk for this area. And definitely one of the more favorable setups I have seen for tornadoes. So you definitely need to stay tuned to those watches and warnings if you live throughout the Texas Panhandle. That includes Amarillo, down through Plainview, Lubbock areas off to the east. Even the Oklahoma Panhandle could get into the mix. This is the target area that I came up with last night. And everybody's in agreement on where it's going to be today across the eastern Texas Panhandle. There is some indication that maybe the southeastern Texas Panhandle could be a little bit more active, but it does look like that warm front could lift up pretty close to the I-40 corridor. Areas just off to the east of Amarillo definitely are going to have that tornado potential. Some monster supercells. Multiple storms are going to be moving across the eastern Texas Panhandle through afternoon and evening, maybe even arriving into western Oklahoma late night tonight. And you never like to throw out outbreak. I was so fired up I even misspelled the word outbreak here with this event. But the Storm Prediction Center corroborates that with that moderate risk here in the eastern Texas Panhandle, including that threat for significant tornadoes. There is a 15% hatch area for strong tornadoes put within this moderate risk here, area there. And in terms of the number of storms, the dynamics and kinematics involved here, the wind fields, this is definitely the most substantial tornado setup that I've chased in years out here in the Texas Panhandle, rivaling those events back in 2007, March 28, April 21st in the Texas Panhandle. Also 2010, April 22nd was a big day out there. May 15, 2003. I started chasing about a year after those big events in 1995, those outbreaks in the Texas Panhandle there. When all the legends of storm chasing, we'll talk about those days in June in 1995. But this is definitely, in terms of the kinematics and dynamics, the intensity of the upper level system, mid 60s dew points this early in the seasonal cycle, early to middle March, is just asinine for this time of year. And that's why we have this moderate risk that's in place. Let's start off looking at the real observations. This is the surface map so far this morning. And look at already a lot of moisture up there, even some snowflakes there in the northwestern Texas Panhandle. Dalhart 38 over 37. That's where I was blasting yesterday to get down to intercept that supercell to the north of Lubbock. I did see the tornado. I was about 7 or 8 miles away from it. I was trying to execute a hook slice maneuver on that supercell, bypass the left split. Then I was going to punch through the hook, and I would have been right there for that tornado. But that storm, as often happens on the Caprock there in Lubbock, kind of ejected off to the east, and that's when it produced the tornado. Probably maximized the streamwise vorticity intake there. But look at this in the Oklahoma Panhandle, temperatures in the 40s. You got to imagine that stable air is going to hang on up there in the Oklahoma Panhandle. That's why I'm going to be targeting a little bit further south. Here's the I-40 corridor. Amarillo socked in with fog, 53 over 53 this morning. Temperatures rise up into the 60s down to the south toward Lubbock, Plainview in the upper 50s there. A lot of fog, big time moisture here in the Texas Panhandle. But as this surface low ejects from southeastern New Mexico, a low-level jet's going to develop. That's going to pump the dew points into the 60s, and it looks like right into the Red River Valley here. There's definitely going to be kind of a streamer of moisture a little bit to the south of I-40, streaming almost up to the southeastern side of Amarillo. But that moisture plume looks like it's going to arrive right up there to the south of Amarillo, Tulia, Plainview, up toward Amarillo. Supercells will initiate probably to the west of the I-27 corridor by about 3 p.m. and then quickly mature but before they hit I-27, possibly even producing tornadoes before they reach that location. And then they're going to evolve across the eastern Texas Panhandle through the late afternoon into the evening hours. And looking at just a couple cherry-picked maps here. This is the HRRR forecast 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity out here. And it kind of shows a bit of a maximum of 0 to 1 kilometer shear as well, kind of in the southeastern Texas Panhandle here, just to the south of I-40. This is at 22Z, so this is 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. And this zone, favorable for strong tornadoes, does lift up to the I-40 corridor just after this by about 4, 5, 6 p.m. and then lifts up even into the northeastern Texas Panhandle with time. But this is definitely, I picked a couple soundings as well in there to go over some of the photographs there. But look at that dew point plume as well that's being indicated by the HRRR, kind of coming in there just a little bit to the south of I-40. Kind of a standard zone here that often gets big-time tornadic supercells across the southeastern Texas Panhandle. Dew points into the mid 60s here, along and to the south of I-40, streaming into this zone, Memphis, Clarendon areas, up toward Tulia. This is at 21Z here by the HRRR forecast. And now let's look at some of the forecast soundings I picked in that prime zone there. These are HRRR forecast soundings. These things are textbook for tornadic supercells. You got high plane soundings as well, but they also kind of support the very dynamic, strong kinematics of this setup here. And look at that elevated mix layer as well. So a little bit of a dry pocket of air coming into the mid-levels. That helps to steepen lapse rates there, or the rate at which temperature cools with height. That gives you a lot of CAPE. So you've got big-time CAPE here with these parcels starting off with temperatures well into the 60s, dew points into the mid-60s. The parcels rise, and notice how they're warmer than the red line there. That means that those parcels are miniature hot air balloons, are warmer than the surroundings, so it continues to rise as it goes up, all the way up until it hits the equilibrium level up above just shy of 200 millibars here in the upper troposphere. That represents the top of the storm. Look at the curvature in the low levels here of the wind profile. You're going from east-southeasterly to southerly just above the ground to southwesterly at 65 knots there at about 3 kilometers. And you can tell that this is definitely a high plains hodograph as well. Your lowest 2 kilometers have an easterly component here. But then you've got these really strong mid-level winds as well, up near 70, 80 knots, kind of showing the strong kinematics of this setup across the Texas Panhandle here. You've got an unstable air mass all the way down to the ground. Of course, your PDS tornado soundings here. But this area between the hodograph and that storm motion vector represents those very strong 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicities. Here's your 1 kilometer wind. Still pretty backed out here in the high plains, realizing that the surface altitudes are a little bit higher. This is a bit of more of a high plains hodograph with a lot of these easterlies in the low levels of the atmosphere, below 2 kilometers there. But your storm motion looks like about 40, 45 knots. Due northeast for that right mover, maybe even a little bit more meridional than northeast. It's a lot more meridional than the storm motions were yesterday, which are basically more of an east-northeasterly direction. But definitely, this is your critical angle as well, the angle of that storm motion vector that it makes with your low-level shear vector. I've been talking to some of my friends who actually came up with that critical angle. And that initial research that kind of talks about the angle here between the storm motion vector and the 0 to 1 kilometer shear vector. Esterheld and Giuliano is a great paper to check out that about the critical angle, and it's definitely become mainstream. And you want a critical angle pretty close to 90 degrees because that maximizes your streamwise vorticity intake within that layer of interest. But this is very close to 90 degrees, about as close as it gets actually for these big time setups, very dynamic setups like this, with these strong winds up here, really driving the storm motion. But this is a textbook hodograph there for a strong tornado threat. It is definitely going to be happening today, folks. This is an awesome product here. These are HREF ensemble forecast tools that are utilized by the Storm Prediction Center. This is being looped from the 0Z models last night. The 12Z are coming in. Kind of showing you the overlap of CAPE here with 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity, and then the little black dots there, that's updraft helicity right there in the 2 to 5 kilometer layer. That just kind of shows the expected number of supercell storms out there in the central and eastern Texas Panhandle. Look at all those dots. Those are representing mesocyclones as resolved by the grid spacing of these models, but it definitely picks up on kind of those that resurgence of those supercells just to the south of I-40 as well. Here is the surface low this morning. Modest surface low in southeastern New Mexico. That's at 12Z. Stepping forward with time, 16Z. Look at this snow that develops in southeastern Colorado, down near Raton Pass, Trinidad. That's at 16Z. Surface low here into probably about the Clovis area to the west of Amarillo. And this is by 21Z or 3 p.m. And 2 p.m., we start to get convective initiation out here to the west of Amarillo, just to the south of that deepening surface low as well. You can see this band of clouds. This is when the peak snowfall rates are also going to arrive in Colorado for the foothills and near the Denver area. This convective plume with a fetch down into the western Gulf of Mexico. But these are going to be supercells initiating here by about 2 p.m., 1 to 2 p.m. off the Caprock, just to the west of Amarillo here, west of Plainview, northwest of Lubbock. That arc of supercells gets initiated. And with the deeper dew point streaming in here to the southeastern Texas Panhandle, these storms are definitely favored initially just to the south of Amarillo here, down toward Plainview. We do have a big-time low-level jet ahead of these storms as well. This is the 700 millibar flow, increasing above 45 knots out of the due south out here ahead of these storms. 850 winds, you can see, representing relatively closer to the surface. Some southeasterlies here as well, and that dry line surging into the western Texas Panhandle by this time. Textbook dry line with these dew points into the mid-60s into the southeastern Texas Panhandle. Dew points dropping down into the teens along the New Mexico Texas border here. Look at these supercells dominating here by 21Z. This is at 3 p.m. Central Time, Central Standard Time, just to the south of Amarillo, down toward Plainview, Tulia, just to the north of Lubbock. These will probably be producing tornadoes by this time, or at least getting ready to produce tornadoes. It definitely shows that these favor these dominant supercells just to the southeast of the Amarillo area. This is at 22Z by 4 p.m. Some supercells also initiating down to the south of that. Down near the Turkey, Texas area to the west of Childress. Could be some dangerous storms as well. A bit more of a linear configuration up here, moving into the Oklahoma Panhandle, northwestern Texas Panhandle here, where there's not as much surface-based instability up there. Probably some big hail still along with that convective line. But look at these renegade supercells, tornado producers by 0Z across the eastern Texas Panhandle. Shamrock, down to just to the northwest of the Childress area. Out here, supercell storms dominating. That convective line unzipping all the way down into the south, into the Caprock there, down near Lubbock, down to Midland as well, the Permian Basin. And then as you go into after dark, these renegade supercells pass into western Oklahoma with a continued tornado threat out there before they finally run out of the instability axis. Moving into central Oklahoma there, they just don't quite make it. The instability axis here remains out with this convective line. And then look at this MCS forming here across the eastern Texas Panhandle. So definitely a dangerous event is on store here across the eastern Texas Panhandle into western Oklahoma late night tonight, but especially this eastern Texas Panhandle region. Looking at the wrap, you can already see this instability building in the vicinity of that surface low, east central New Mexico here. And by 20Z, the wrap model is in agreement with convective initiation to the west and to the southwest of the Amarillo area, with those storms approaching the I-27 corridor by about 3 or 4 p.m., likely producing tornadoes. You're going to have to be patient today because these supercells are going to get going to the west of Amarillo pretty early, and they might entice you as a chaser to head out there and intercept those storms, but it does look like the more intense supercells are going to develop just to the south of Amarillo, where you can see that deeper moisture is going to be surging up to the south of the Red River and along the Red River Valley into the southeastern Texas Panhandle there. Some deeper moisture. 2,500 Cape, though. Big Cape out here. I remember when we were looking at the GFS models and those longer range models, how meager of an instability axis they had on Saturday. They had 4 today, but we kept saying once the short range models grasp this setup, they're going to show stout instability axis. Such a closed, powerful upper level low like this, dumping feet of snow in Colorado, it's just inevitable that it's going to have severe weather and a tornado threat in that warm sector. So even by 20Z, those helicities increase above 200, the effective helicities, storm relative helicities, and those are only going to increase as we go through the day. But boy, it certainly does look good, even in the Amarillo area, for severe weather, favorable, I should say, for that tornado threat. So keep an eye out in Amarillo with these north-northeasterly storm motions. I think it's almost inevitable that Amarillo, just to the southeast of Amarillo, through the Oklahoma border into western Oklahoma by late night tonight, And this is a big-time severe weather event, one of the more substantial that I've chased in years out here in the Texas Panhandle. And this is definitely a very dynamic upper-level system as well. We can kind of zoom out and show you what this thing looks like on a national scale here. And here is the upper level storm system. This blob circulating right over the Four Corners region. It's going to become more compact as it slides in to southeastern Colorado during the forecast period. And that's going to focus that upslope just across northeastern Colorado into southeastern Wyoming. But boy, have the models been trending down with the mega snow across northern Colorado. Probably a foot, maybe a foot and a half in Denver. Likely more in the Colorado foothills with a more prolonged event. And then on Monday, that severe weather threat shifts east, and then the eyes are going to be on this system dropping south through the California coast again. Models have been showing that next week the southeastern Great Plains and Dixie Alley are going to come alive once again with a more consolidated jet stream structure developing during the second half of March. But thank you everybody for joining me for this live weather briefing. I'm going to be back live, of course, during storm chase mode throughout this event. This is a big day today. Hopefully everybody stays safe. Storm chasers are going to be all over this thing. It's very difficult for a tornado to touch down and not get reported, live streamed, or even intercepted these days. We've come so far storm chasing wise, and it's just a great thing to see, but definitely important for everybody to stay safe out there. Here is this moderate risk by the Storm Prediction Center. Eastern Texas Panhandle, especially to the east and southeast of the Amarillo area, but also pretty tight to Amarillo there as well. Big time event today expected, folks. Put on your seatbelts. Storm chase mode is activated.